Welcome to Invest in Yourself, the Digital Entrepreneur Podcast. Join the podcast mogul Phil Better as he interviews successful entrepreneurs that make their living in the digital world. Now, let's join your host, Phil Better, and his special guest today on Invest in Yourself, the Digital Entrepreneur Podcast. Welcome back to another amazing episode of Invest in Yourself, the Digital Entrepreneur Podcast. I am, of course, Phil Better, podcast mogul, and today we're privileged to host a truly inspiring individual whose life story exemplifies the powers of resilience, creativity, and transformation. Born into the challenges of mental health struggles and neurodiversity in Manchester, New Hampshire, our guest faced bullying and misunderstanding from a young age. Yet it was with the world of stories through poetry, novels, and music that he found solace and a sense of belonging, shielding him from a world quick to judge and slow to support. To find the voices that once labeled him a monster and a mistake, he turned his deep passion for stories into a beacon of hope and a tool for advocacy. As he grew, he not only shared his stories, but also his strength, becoming an advocate, a teacher, and a mentor. His journey led him to roles where his passion was not only valued, but essential, helping young people discover the joy of reading and guiding others towards independence. As a peer specialist, he's uplifted countless lives, encouraging others to find and use their voices. Now, stepping into the fantastical realm of Dungeons and Dragons, he uses his narrative prowess to mentor and connect communities in innovative ways. He builds bridges for those navigating their paths, fostering a world that embraces all and intentional and compassionate in every step. Please join me welcoming a storyteller, a bridge builder, a beacon of hope, the light of Gondor itself, who has turned his trials into triumphs, Thomas Wilson. Thomas, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me on. That is one heck of an intro. That was smiles all the way around. Thank you.
You're very welcome. I may not be a storytelling prowess, but I do believe I know how to use the words properly, and I love hyping up our guests. And you were one of the guests that when I got your request to be on the podcast, I knew exactly I needed you on ASAP because I love what you're doing. I'm a very big advocate for mental health, for neurodivergency, because without you guys, well, not you guys per se, but without people who are neurodivergent, we wouldn't be seeing the changes we see in the world today. So that's why I want to keep advocating for you guys, for people who are fighting a better fight than I can. And plus, it touches close to home. My brother lives with paranoid schizophrenia, and I see what storytelling has helped him and keep him happy. So why not share the love? But Thomas, welcome to the show.
Thank you again for having me on.
Let's dive into it. I talked to your early life. You were bullying. You were bullied. Sorry, you weren't bullying people. You were bullied. Sorry. And now you're the owner operator of Sensory Friendly Storytelling. Like, how did that happen? Like, why? What prompted you to jump into this journey?
Definitely. So that might be an error on my part on the tag. I actually run R&H Creative Advocacy and Storytelling LLC.
Oh, I apologize.
Oh, no worries. But so to dive into why I'm doing this work, to dive into all of this, really the inspiration comes from being a youth in a system that just did not work. I grew up in the school system in the early 90s and 2000s. I always herald that as a terrible time for mental health. Yes, there was a lot of good things going on, but the media, the world around us, the mentality just around therapy was very archaic. It was, I know, like in TV shows, a lot of the focus was if you went to therapy, you were crazy, which it's changed astronomically since then. And I'm so glad to see that. But that was also what I grew up around. I grew up around a lot of people who weren't dealing with mental health. I grew up in an education system that deemed me more of a problem than anything else. And it's actually really interesting because my early years in schools, I was considered a prodigy, and then I was diagnosed with mental health, and that changed dramatically. Yes, my behavior changed and a lot changed, but I grew up in that. I also spent a lot of time in systems that deemed me too hard to work with, too problematic, too disruptive. These are programs that were meant to help. I'm not going to name any names because I don't want to get anyone in trouble. I don't want to diminish the good work they're doing now. But I also really have been a lifelong fan of stories. I've been, ever since I was as young as possible, listening to stories, listening to great writers. I always joke on podcasts that if you think you're an edgelord now, try being a 4-year-old who got mad at people because they couldn't quote The Raven correctly. Edgar Allan Poe, and try being that 4-year-old arguing this is how you read it. But I'm a big advocate for people reading Edgar Allan Poe, one of my literary heroes, who wrote about mental health in a way that still is impactful to this day. He's a big reason I do what I do. But outside of those programs, one of the things I learned at a young age was there are a lot of needs that aren't really being met, aren't really being focused on. And so, in this, what I try to do with my work is not just tell stories, not just meet the youth or the adults that I work with where they're at. I really try to focus in on empathy and fill gaps in programs, fill needs in the community, fill the idea that anyone can thrive, anyone can succeed if they're given the care they needed. And yes, I focus on stories within mental health, neurodiversity, other underserved communities. But my really big belief is that if we focus on honoring all people and teach them how they learn, not how we want them to learn, they can go out and succeed. And so far, it's been a wild ride, but it's been proven time and time again that empathy-based leadership, person-first mindset, and creating stories that help us connect to our humanity and grow, those are all things that can be facets of success.
I love that. I love how you are putting the emphasis on how a person learns instead of saying, hey, this is how you have to learn. Because the more we look at the individual, the better off we are as a society and taking care of those people. With your story-based teaching, in essence, because that's what you're doing, you're teaching using stories. How did that come together? How did that link for you that this was a positive way to help people learn and get that independence, or at least get to the next level of their journey?
So I would have to say a big part of it comes from my time reading and writing as a youth. I've actually published several books. My first one by the time that I was just graduated high school. But I learned that that was a capacity to teach people. I'd known it since I was a kid, realizing how many times my fellow classmates and I connected to books. I knew it as a teenager when I found that people connected to their favorite work. But really, what pulled it into focus was the idea that stories have been around humanity as long as we've been around. We've had this innate desire to tell stories, to be a part of stories, to create things. I mean, like one of the great examples is Greek mythology, another is cave drawing. And so when I started doing this emphasis on storytelling based education and mentorship and other programs, what I really wanted to pin down was how stories can empower us, how they can help us learn by active practice. It's a continual process, but I realized that helping people share their story, helping them be a part of like Dungeons and Dragons or other storytelling events, there's this connection to the human brain. There's a passion, there's a drive. Even in video games, it's a very similar thing. So I spent a lot of years focusing on that. But when I started to apply it, I honestly didn't think it'd be as big a success as it's been. But I started asking people questions. Started by saying, "What are you getting out of this? What's your favorite focus? What did this character teach you?" And it's kind of come from there, that very raw foundation. As stories make the brain think, they make the heart thump, they cause blood to flow through our brain veins and brain differently. And so, really, it starts with observation and questions, and it's evolved since there.
I love it. When you look at the space you're in, because you're in a very unique space here, there's not many people focusing on this type of place. Plus, with the style of your aid being like story based instead of just teaching based, how do others in the space react to you when they see what you're doing, that it's going kind of against convention?
So the really cool thing has been, often when I tell people about my work, from time to time there's some apathy, and then I start diving into the results. Overall, though, the community is incredibly excited. And when I say community, I mean lots of communities, not just the mental health, not just the neurodiverse, not just the LGBTQ plus. People are excited to find out about this because you're right. I am in a very unique space, using stories, using tabletop role playing games, using video games, other things like that. And the resounding response I get is, how does this work? How do you make this work? That's so cool. I love this idea. It's got to be a lot of hard work. There's so much excitement. And I think that really comes from the mentality that this is unique, that it is growing rapidly, that it is becoming part of a way to treat people in some really unique ways. And yes, I meet a lot of people who aren't interested, but I'll tell you right now, the amount of work that I'm offered is starting to get more than I can handle on my own. But it's all built around, I think, that human connection, that idea that stories really can be used this way is just something the communities love so dearly.
I love that. And I also love that that's a problem you have. You have too much work. That's always a problem us entrepreneurs love. Um, I want to go through a process of how someone, how you use your stories to teach. Like, how does this work? Like, if I was to hire you, how would we go about working with you? Or like, what would be the steps?
So definitely. So to start with how they work, I'm going to focus in on D&D for just a minute because it's
Please.
one of the more simplistic, but it's also a very popular thing. So one of the first things I do, and I always like to highlight this, is I work to set up the space so it's conducive to the environment. I often say like the energy of a room, and I realize a lot of people might roll their eyes when I say that, but what I mean by that is how chairs are set up, how tables are set up, if there's space to move about if you need, if there's a safe space to turn to if you get anxious or depressed or anything else, as well as the lighting, the noise capacity, things like that. And then when people actually start to show up, one of my first interests is to really display a very positive energy, but a very genuine one. I'll greet each individual, I'll try to shake their hand if they're comfortable. I'll ask them questions about themselves, or their interests. And especially when I hand them character sheets, which can be overwhelming because there's so many details. Often start with, what's your favorite video game? What kind of character and fantasy do you like? Do you have a favorite kind of player to play as in like Overwatch is an example? Ask if they're like bulky characters, fast moving characters. And then when I do that, I follow that up with, okay, let's help you find what you're looking for. And that in and of itself, that comment is a transfer from me having the power to someone else for their opportunity to express themselves. And then as gameplay goes on, I work to encourage and foster communication among all the players. I work to answer questions as I can. I work to give each player their own devoted time and segment. And at this point, some of my groups are getting so large, it's hard to do that all the time. But there's a common thread in all of this, which is honoring each individual. And as I do that, I also give them time to problem solve through their own decision making, their own processes, their own what they want to own for that character for that hour and a half. And then really work to make sure that my energy and my tone is very calm, is very docile. Well, not docile, but like level
Well,
headed,
yeah,
kind.
you're the stability of the group. While everybody else has their energies up and up, you try and keep it as we're not going below this level of energy. We're keeping it at this. We can go above it, but we're not going below it. And I think that it comes across chatting with you here, Thomas. You're a very level-headed man, or a level-headed person, and I'm enjoying this conversation. I am curious. but using the role of Dungeons and Dragons as a platform for mentoring and building community, how to use the game to foster that connection and teach the valuable life skills to the participants, because you touched on it. You create a sense of community by being the person in charge. It's like, hey, I'm in charge, but it's all about you. And you know, with the character sheet, which if anybody's done D&D, it's very complicated for us non-neurodivergent or non mental health people, or people without mental health issues. But once the game starts rolling, how do you keep keep them connected to the community as a whole for them? Ooh,
So one
I
big
believe.
thing that I try to do so one quick thing that I try to do is I always try to honor my players' ideas. I've run across a lot of game masters who emphasize too much that the story is theirs. And it's a fine line between giving a player ideas to bounce off and losing control of the game. But I really do try to work in what my players want to try, how they want to try it. That's a huge way of keeping their interest. I also work in the realm of really working hard to make sure those peer relationships are really forming. So if there's two players who are chatting and they're really having a great time together, I'll actually let that play out for a little bit until I need to intervene. One thing I do want to point out is a lot of facilitators in today's world want kids or youth, adults to fit within a very specific confine of this is what we're doing, this is how we're doing it. And that's good in its own space. But the events I run are very much designed to honor who my players are in their sense, in their most honest sense. So I listen to them, I give them story ideas, I bounce ideas off, I make sure that I'm asking them questions that they can understand. I'm keeping my phrasing good. I make sure that if they have time and really need to talk to me, they have that time. And the other big thing is giving them decisions that can have a negative fallout that they don't have to deal with in the real world. So problem solving around how do you help this individual who's traveling on the highway? And if he's an evil dude, they can have that safety and that secure net. Um, I should have said security and safety net. Be able
It's
to
a
make that
security net. It's fine. That works.
um to make that decision in real time, but not have the social emotional punishment of real life. Another big thing that I try really hard to focus on is the mentality that all voices matter. So even if there's conflict, I try to make sure that everyone knows that they are heard and they are valued. And everything I mentioned is really built around respect, admiration, and mutual collaboration. And I could go on and on. We don't have time for me to go into this in full detail. But those are some of the core aspects.
I love how you mentioned that you give your players time to grow between themselves if there's a moment, and you're always there. And it does come into mentoring, which is something that's very important because you're mentoring these individuals in your stories, in your games, and that. And I'm curious if you have any specific if you can share with us maybe a rewarding experience you've had, a success story where you help someone find their voice through the game, in essence.
So I actually have a lot of those. I think one of my favorites um, is not going to name any names just for the sake of
Privacy, of course.
that individual's. Yeah. But there was one individual, she's been playing D&D with me for over a year now. One of the first attendees of my first event at a SWAT called the Autism Community Store. And she's been around for a while. It was just a few months ago. We were talking. This individual loves to twirl, loves to dance, loves to draw, and I've been helping foster that. And over time, this individual we've had to work on redirection and focus and all through gameplay. And for a while, I wasn't sure that she was handling it well. And then I started to ask her directly, what are you enjoying? How are you enjoying it? How's the game going? And the connection has really formed there. She's been showing up almost every time. She's been helping individuals. She's bought her own dice and her own minis to bring with her. But I think one of the coolest aspects was her mom texted me and sent me a photo saying, we're having a D&D themed birthday party. And they got, if you don't know what a beholder is, it's like an orb-like thing with a giant eye and tentacles that have eyes in it as well. But they had a specific cake shaped like a beholder. And the really cool aspect of that was I gave the party a size-changing beholder. It's become one of this young lady's favorite aspects of the game, and they transferred it into a birthday cake.
Oh my
Um,
God.
and it's one of the most heartwarming things that's happened in such a long time, on top of the other many things. But it's such a joy.
I think that's an amazing case study, amazing success story that this lady, for her love, has gone from just twirling around and that to having a birthday cake, a D&D themed birthday cake, coming and helping people. I think that's a wonderful story about how you were case study, in essence, if you will. Where do you want to go with what you're doing right now? I know you're doing amazing work with your community and you're coming to a point where you're nearly overwhelmed, if you will, and you're soon probably going to have to hire tens of thousands of people more. But where do you want to go? Do you have a goal set, like a landmark, a place where you're like, okay, this is where I'm going to be happy when I reach this, or this is where I exit out, or this is whatever?
I think for me, a big part of it is each day is a new goal. There's something new I want to achieve. And I think for me, one of the big goals, at least for within the next year, is I want to see how it goes, but I want to be able to understand and be able to adapt to the community more. So either that be programs, that'd be new classes, whole bunches of things, maybe an interconnected work of trainees. There's so many new opportunities, and my personal belief is every day can be a new opportunity to do better. But one of my big hopes for the future, and this is a very far off dream because I've got camps and stuff happening, but this is one of the big goals. One of my goals that I've been telling people a while is to have an international storytelling festival on the Scottish Isles that has to focus on empathy-based care. And at the point, depending on how things go, that could happen in the next 2 to 3 years. So it could be a while before I achieve that, but I mean, after those 2 to 3 years, it's going to be what comes next. And the other end of it is I just love to see this generation of storytellers that I'm witnessing grow in their skills, continue, carry on the work, and just help change the world even more.
I love it. And that kind of talks about you building your inclusive communities, because that's what you're doing. You're building bridges to help support people on their journeys. Do you have any specific strategies or approaches you use to create more inclusive and supportive environments where you work?
Definitely. There's two big things. One of them is me removing my ego. I find a really easy way to shut down inclusivity, and we see this in lots of things, in movies, in books, and TV shows. People set out to do things, but they get an ego and stuff gets taken back or inclusivity phases. But I think for me, understanding that there's always more skills, always more education, there are always things that I can do better is a huge part to helping me understand inclusivity. And the other big thing is kind of in a similar facet, understand that there's always going to be someone new who's going to challenge you. Always going to be a new situation where you may have to grow. You may have to understand that person. As all people are different, there's going to be different needs who show up each time. There's going to be different communities to access. So be willing to honor those people, being willing to put in the effort, and understanding that it's not often about me. It's about them and making sure that I'm honoring them.
I love that. That's a very good way of looking at it, taking out the ego. Because I think egocentricity is ruining a lot of businesses and a lot of communities. It's more about how we can support. And I love, pardon me, being part of the podcasting community, because it is all about support, how we can help each other make the space a better place. Now, with this show, it's obviously about investing in yourself, coming to the next level. So I do have a question about that. So throughout your career, you had to invest a lot in your personal and professional development to overcome challenges and help others. What are some key investments you made in yourself that have been crucial to your success as an advocate and a mentor?
So the first big one is making sure that each day I'm investing as much as I can into my mental health and my awareness of myself. I always tell people nowadays, each day is a new challenge to continue to put the care in and put the effort in and continue to work on myself. The other big thing for me was understanding what my happiness is, understanding what will make me happy, and understanding, and this may be one a lot of people don't want to hear, but happiness is very fickle. It can be there one moment, it can be gone another, literally within seconds. And I think for me, understanding that my happiness, my joy, even if it's gone for a moment or a week or so, that it can't be back, or there can be something even better that will replace it, is a huge thing for me.
All right, that's an amazing thing. Investing in your mental health. Obviously, someone who's in the mental health space is advocating for it, so it's a huge thing. We are coming to the end of the episode, which I hate because I'm having such a great time talking with you, Thomas. This has been one of my more favorite episodes this day. My question here is, I have your 10-year-old self here, Thomas. He's unfortunately been, 10-year-old self, middle school, not the best time of life, right? Especially in the 90s and early 2000s. I'm a product of it. I fully understand it. But I have your 10-year-old self here, Thomas. What is one piece of advice you would love to hand back to your 10-year-old self?
A big one for me is today may suck, tomorrow may suck, things may be hard, but the only way that you will get past it is to keep moving forward and to acknowledge that no matter how bad things are, they will be better if you keep moving forward and don't give up on yourself.
I love that. It's simplicity at its best. Keep moving forward, because today may suck, but tomorrow may be a brighter future. Reminds me of the tome, "This Too Shall Pass." Thomas, I'm going to jump off stage here. I want you to tell my audience where they can connect with you if they're looking for some sensory-friendly storytelling or need some mentoring in that as well. So, sir, the floor is yours.
Definitely. So you can see my website at rhcreativeadvocacyandstorytelling.net. I will also make sure that my link tree is set up. You can always email me at ndttrpg@gmail.com. Didn't realize how many of those sound so similar when I set that up. With any questions. And then I always have, if you're in the community in Colorado, anywhere else, feel free to say hi, feel free to stop by. And again, I'm a huge advocate for questions. I believe they are one of the big pathways to power. So please feel free to contact me, check out my link tree. You can also see me on LinkedIn. I'm Thomas Rody Wilson on there. And I want to thank you all for your time and listening to me talk.
Thomas, I can't thank you enough. It was a pleasure having you on, chatting with you, learning about all this, and helping advocate for an alternate way of learning is always the key, and supporting our minorities, maybe our groups that may be under-supported. Thomas, thank you again. To my audience, thank you. Make sure you check out the show notes. I'll make sure you have all the links there, and especially the link to Thomas's email, because like he said, it's a little tongue twister, but if you caught it, great. But it will be in the show notes down below. I thank you again for listening, and always remember to invest in yourself.